Welcome everyone to White Light Blessings. I'm your host, Francesca, and we have our very special guest today, Jessie, who is back again, much awaited after like a month, 3 weeks. And Jessie, we had an amazing conversation last time, and there was so much that we went into. But today we're going to talk about your training and your experience with that and everything you went through that you wish to talk about. And yeah, just handing it
Yeah,
over to you.
sounds good. It is so extensive, and I try to break it down into pieces because there is so much, and even with breaking it down, there's still so much more. So I try to just give, a brief overview, tackle it kind of piece by piece. But I do have some things in the works that I think are helpful if people want to kind of catch up or revisit certain topics. So I want to make sure I give those resources kind of at the beginning here because they'll really be a valuable tool as you're hearing my testimony and as we're going through things. So the first resource is on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. On there, you'll find my series, Unveiling the System. So that's going to be the most extensive, comprehensive breakdown of the system that is available. And, I start at the very top. I'm working my way through that series. It's going to be a continuing series where I'll continue to add more and more videos to it, both on the government side of the brotherhood system as well as for the sovereign military. So it really begins to give you a good picture of what we're dealing with. Um, Particularly, with the sovereign military, you also get, well, with all of it, you get the Nazism, but you get the connection, of a foreign military operating in conjunction with our military, as well as militaries around the world. And that's important to realize because we have, as we begin to look at the training aspect that the hierarchy kids go through, or things that expendable, those they consider expendable children are going to go through, it's going to be mixed with, your brotherhood, your sovereign military infiltrating different structures of our society, regionally and quadrantly. So that's a great resource. The other one is still in the works, but parts of it are going to be found on timothycharleshomeseth.com. On there, you'll find my affidavits as well as my Congress petitions. And if you look up my name and either of those words, those will pull up. But the resource that I'm creating from those is going to be a book, and it's going to focus and center on the training that the hierarchy children go through. Because worldwide, the system has a mass training program, and children are brought into that program unaware starting around age 4.5, 5. Most of their families don't know what's going on with them. It happens either through, you get a few daycares that will get involved, but mostly the school systems. And children go to school, and then they're selected. They're going to go through different forms of testing. And then from there, they're going to begin to, I'll call it, tour different military bases. And those military bases and tours are going to determine, what they're chosen for in the system, what position they're going to be trained for, what that training is going to entail. So that can, be training, that can be projects, that can be programs, that can be MK Ultra, based on what their position is and what they'll be used for. So we're going to get into that. I want to start again with just like a reminder of my testimony that, um, although a big chunk of my family, my maternal side, were all involved in this Luciferian brotherhood, not my mom or my dad, but that maternal side. Um, I came to the Lord at age 3. And, we shared that story last time. So I went into the system as a believer, and I didn't have, all these tools. I didn't have all this spiritual warfare experience. There was nothing about me in regards to that made me extra special. In fact, I was a very, I'll say, advantageous child, very creative, very, you know, I was like a goer, a doer. I always wanted to be, go, 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 do, and very creative. And so, as my training started at age 4.5, I thought things were just going to be normal. I grew up with all these boy cousins. Was used to playing outside, um, always busy finding things to do. And then all of a sudden, I find myself my first day of kindergarten. And there's some things, it's like my proctor was the one, like I didn't even know what she was all involved in yet. I didn't know any of those things. And I can remember her taking me to school that first day, holding my hand. And as we walked through the hallways and got to the classroom, I noticed a little boy with his mother kind of outside the door, and she was just kind of futzing with him, like fixing his shirt and his hair and all this stuff. And, um, so then as we walked in, it was like all of a sudden the environment completely changed. Like I can't explain what the environment was like, but I see, this room, I see several older women. And it was like all of a sudden there was this silent hush, and I saw all these kids kind of being brought, into the room and sitting on the floor, Indian style, in a circle. And, nothing was said. Like it was like you're like, what am I supposed to do? Right? You're like, I don't even know what to do. And so anyway, I just, the little boy had come in, he sat down, I went, sat down next to him. And next thing we know, my, proctor and all these women are taking out this box. And I kind of like to, add a little bit of the humor, but really it was dark. But the humor, just helps people get a feel for
Yeah.
what it was really like as a kid. So it's like they've got this box and they're like, ooh, like there's all these items, and they're putting them out like in the middle of us, like in a circle arrangement. And there were things like, crow feathers, black shawls, candles, like tarot cards, things we didn't even know what these things were, crystals, and they just start putting all of these items out. And then, the big, the kind of big to do, and the one, is like, all right, we're gonna play a game. And we're all like, woohoo, like we're excited. But then the game is that we're gonna get up one at a time, pick an item, show everybody, and put it back in the circle. And it's like, what? And when I heard that, I started laughing. I was like, that is the stupidest game ever. I was like, who wants to pick an item and put it back?
Right.
And as I started laughing, the little boy started laughing too. And that's when I realized, like I turned and I looked at him, and in my head I said, "Can you hear me?" And he responded, "Yes." So that was the first spiritual connection that I had. And that little boy ended up being my training partner in the system, the one that they chose to be my protector. So within this system, it's common for children in training to have partners. They do twinning, which I get into, but in the book that I'm writing. But I also have it in some of my affidavits, but I don't think that those parts are public yet. But they choose children, they put them together, and then they're going to pair you based on what they consider equilibrium, meaning that one's going to be considered fire magic, the other is going to be considered water, or it could be air and earth, or the other common pairings. One's going to be considered male, the other female, but they're not, that doesn't refer to gender. Like that refers to how you give and receive energy, and whether that energy is negative or positive. It also refers to music theory, frequency. In music, you'll have major tones and minor tones, and all of us have a soul resonance. Our soul naturally tunes into the overall song that God has created in creation. And either we're, part of that melody, or we're part of the harmony. We're either major or minor tunes. So, they're going to figure out all of those things and then begin to pair children for, as they begin training. And these tests help them distinguish those things. So, like the test that they did with all of the items, the purpose was to see like what you would naturally pick, because children are drawn to familiar spirits, familiar things. So they see what type of magic, what type of spirits are you naturally tuned to kind of, navigate towards. Um, so that was the first test. And then, it just continued from there. There would be all sorts of things that they're going to see to figure out, all the specifics we just spoke about. Well, with that, then, from there, they're going to begin to connect you to the different military bases where you'll have more testing done. There's four major military bases um, within the United States and kind of outside that they're going to have all the children for the first testing go to. Um, so the first one is going to be what's considered Ragnarok. It's actually made of three major military bases. You have the Northern Ragnarok, which is the first one is off of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. The second one is off of Greenland. And I would propose everything we see with Greenland right now has to do very much with Ragnarok and the military base there.
Mhm.
The third Ragnarok is down in Antarctica. And so those three children can do stints at all three. Now, the sign, like in my affidavits, I get into how the schools, how the system will label your schools with cherubic signs that they use. And those signs will tell you which schools are connected to which military bases. So
Wow.
you have four major cherubic signs. The for the north, this is the easiest way to explain it, but the north is your eagle, or any flying creature, birds, dragons, anything like that. They'll go. So if you have a dragon, a bird, anything like that, the kids at that school will go to Ragnarok, either one of the northern ones or the southern one.
Okay.
Then you have to the east, you have the lion, which is going to be any carnivorous creature. So it could be bears, wolves, tigers, panthers, cougars. If your school is labeled with those, the kids are going to go to Carderock Naval War Center in Maryland.
And you see
Then
that
you have
all the time. Like, sorry, Jess. You see,
yeah, you're
like,
good.
I see that all the time. Like a lion on the school emblem, or whatever, a phoenix or a bird or something. I think
Yeah.
you just think it's just the school's like emblem, and you keep driving.
Right. And you have no clue. It means so much more, right?
Yeah.
Well, so the South then is what's the considered the man or the sign of the man. So it could be like a knight, a warrior, an Indian. It could be a tool of a man, like an arrow, a sword.
Right.
It could even be weather, like a tornado, things like that.
Mhm.
So any sign of a man is going to go south. And you know, that you're going to have a couple bases that will will fit into that. They can go to the southern Ragnarok, the Antarctica with that, but they
Mhm.
also can go to they're going to pull in one of your, it's on the west coast, but your um hold on, I'm blanking on the name right now. It's in San Francisco. um it's on the tip of my tongue. Coronado, Coronado military
Okay.
base, sorry.
That's not an easy
So
word. It's okay.
Coronado is the southern base. And then
Right.
they're going to have, and that one does like a lot of second years too. So usually they'll send the kids, you know, for a stint down in Antarctica, then they'll go to Coronado. You
Mhm.
also have Coronado, you know, serving as a secondary training for the Western base, which when kids go for that, like the sign is going to be an ox or any domestic animal. So, like an ox, a horse, a camel, a goat, a bull, um, anything like that is going to be your West. And then that will go to California, particularly the Palisades base. So, each of these programs and stints have different uh, what we call simulations that the kids are going to go through. Some of them, you know, like if they're at Carter, some of those stents are going to connect then, you know, for the future to places like Emerald City, which is under the Pentagon. And you're going to get a lot of connection to these programs to classic literature. So, you know, it could be The Wizard of Oz, it could be Alice in Wonderland, it could be, you know, 2000 Leagues Under the Sea. Um, you know, for the West Palisades base, you get a connection to Peter Pan and different scenario training with that. So it just depends on, you know, what the child is being trained for. They'll go through different simulations. Each of those bases can have different um, connections to obstacle courses. You know, they, some of their simulations are actual islands, like you've heard of, you know, Epstein Island, Montauk, all of those. You know, you even get Plum Island,
Mhm.
Jackal Island. All of those are going to have different simulations that are run through them connected to the kids. Now, you also get connected to the southern bases. They are going to include, like they're not exclusive, so they won't always be first year, but you can get NORAD and Telluride out of Colorado involved in that, as well as you have an underground city of Asgard under Yellowstone National Park. Um, so they can have other facilities that are going to play big roles based on what the position is. And how do they choose? You know, they're going to be looking for certain skills, certain um, magical abilities, frequency, but they're looking, you know, it's not just that they're using these children, they're looking for kids that they're going to raise up in their circle groups, you know, and you'll have these big groups, and there can be many in the Brotherhood and the Sovereign Military side. They can sit in as many magic circle groups as they want. Um, and so, you know, they're looking for kids that they're going to bring up to be part of those circle groups with the express purpose of being able to open and operate the spiritual gates through sexual magic or other means. That really is the main agenda behind all of it. The training is for the spiritual gates and them being able to access the spiritual dimensions. They're also going to be, you know, looking for children that come from long family lines that have contracts with spiritual entities, with again with that purpose of, you know, making contracts with those entities and alliances for power, authority, jurisdiction over areas, use of areas. So, every child that they connect with, there's going to be those spiritual contracts, which then give power, authority, and jurisdiction to the entire circle group. So, um, that's their goal and aim in that. Um, for the first, I'll say like your average child that gets entered into the projects, maybe let me quick finish one more thing with training. So, I would kind of put the things into those three categories. You have the training, you have the projects, and then you'd have the programs, which MK Ultra would be considered, under the programs. All of those things are going to be geared under an umbrella that they call the Monarch program. Now, you have the specific program connected to MK Ultra is also called the Monarch program, but it's
Right.
not the overall umbrella. So there
Okay.
is a difference. Um, so with training, these children are going to have teachers, they're going to have family members, they're going to have people, both dark side, light side, in their circle groups that are going to be in charge of rearing them up in the way that they should go. And that's going to include both their cover life, as well as, their brotherhood position within the circle group. So they're going to be aware of, kind of what's happening. They're going to learn how they are to work and operate, what's their guise, what's their faith background. They're going to have a structure in that. It can be religious or not. It can be through
Okay.
any denomination, Jesuit, Catholic, Lutheran, Amish, um, you know, Baptist, Methodist, it doesn't matter. It can be any group. It just, or non-religious. It could be Kabbalistic, Satanist, Mormon, um, Mormon falls under the religions, but it can be anything with that. So, the children will just be raised in the way that they're to go. And many of the things, like, they're not going to, connect necessarily that it is part of a system. Like, they're not going to learn it in those terms. It's just life. That's the way things are. This is the way
Okay.
you live. This is what you do. And you'll get a lot of instructions like good people, you know, don't air their family secrets, good people do this or that. And
Mm.
there's always these innuendos of how you're supposed to behave or act. And I call it the virtue squad. It's very high in perfectionism. And at the core, is, if they are Christian groups, you're going to have a mix where, the first part of the abuse is that they love bomb you with Jesus and salvation and God loves you. And then the second part of the abuse is that, they take that all away. Whatever the sin is that has been committed by people in your circle group now is your sin. And now, God is angry. You have to earn or work your salvation, and they begin to play the mind games with what that is. So an example of that, one of the things that I witnessed was a little girl that, was raped by the priest. And, she was very dogmatic after it and went after the priest. And all the women, older women, came together and, began to attack her. In fact, the one that was my main trainer, my proctor, her exact words were to her, you know, how dare you attack the man of God? If you had kept your knees together, you wouldn't have had this problem. And why couldn't you keep your knees together? Because they're too fat. Like that's exactly what she told her. And it's like, so you'll have the whole, circle group attack, and now they make it where you are the one who committed the crime, and rather than, the members of your circle group. So that's a common thing. And, that virtue squad, it can include, they'll do silent treatment. They'll throw the children into dark places that could be basements, that could be locking them in closets, that could be locking them in pits or wells. That will be
So
part of the
just
compliance
terrible
training.
psychological warfare or psychological torture, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, so you'll keep going through those things until you comply. That's
Right.
kind of how they do it, is the punishment will continue until you comply. Whatever that, whatever they deem is the punishment. Um, and sometimes it's not just you by yourself. If you can't be correctable by yourself, they'll begin to punish all the children in your circle group together. And that's to cause peer reinforcement, you know, um, because none of the other children want to be punished either. So they figure that's
Yeah.
the best way is to try to, you know, really get your peers angry at you, and then, hopefully you'll comply. So, a lot of things have a form of godliness, but
Yeah.
yet it's really not of God. And it's, a twisting, a deception of the word, a manipulation of the word of God. So that's training. And with training, you can have proctors, teachers. These are individuals that, some of them are going to choose children to take their positions,
Yeah.
and their job in that of the teacher or the proctor is to train the children in exactly what they do, so that when they step down or if something happens, the child will step into that position and be able to fulfill everything that was being done. So then you have the programs, and those are going to be very specific. Um, those are going to include different things. So I would say things like, Epstein Island was a program, Montauk was a program. You have the Looking Glass, which was a program. That,
Mhm.
that's the first one they're going to start kids in that are high in visions, um, especially in end time things. And they would put children into scenarios where they would be seeing into the spirit world, having these end time visions, and then they're going to document through biofeedback everything the child saw. And from that, they're going to begin to try to play with or manipulate time. They want to see what's the end time vision, and what are the steps leading up to that vision, what are the
Mhm.
consequences of each of those steps, and where can we shift things to try to get a different outcome. So in those programs of the Looking Glass, they usually will pair three children, all strong in visions, but different forms. So they'd have one that would really get a good vision of the end time thing or end time event scene. Then another one's going to see the steps leading up to that. The third child is going to see the steps and the consequences in those steps. And they take all that biofeedback together and begin to put together pictures over time. And so these, they've been doing those for many years. I would say even starting back to probably your 40s is when they
Mhm.
really began to start that program. Now, after the Looking Glass program, the kids graduate. If they graduate and go to the next one, then it's going to be the Star Wars Now programs, and those lead into the Star Wars programs. And with those, they're going to begin to teach about the spiritual gates, the use of spiritual gates. And the purpose is to train the children to open, close gates, not necessarily the massive ones that are above the earth or below the earth, but you get a lot of the gates that operate horizontally. So, like, let's say, like your Capitol buildings in the United
Mhm.
States, you're going to have gates there, and those are going to operate. You'll have a point A, and then they'll go from point B, point C, point
Yep.
D. So
Mm.
they'll teach the kids how to get from one place to another through all these various spiritual gates. But, it'll be limited to what position are they in? What are they chosen for? So not every child is going to learn a mass amount. Like they may just learn for their area, maybe one or two gates. That may be all that they know exists. So, so that's, your Star Wars, that's going to get into then some specific positions as well. You get in the upper councils of the system, their military is a universal military connected to the United Nations military. And connected to that, you have the Galactic Federation. Now, our post offices are connected to the Galactic Federation. This is
No.
a universal military. And
No.
within that, you're going to get Jedi, you're going to get Sith, you have a dark side, you've got a light side, and you're going to get Star Wars, actual Star Wars, where, they're fighting within dimensions, they're transporting, they're delivering things. Um,
I'm
so,
sorry, Jessie. They make like I feel like we've been brainwashed to think that these things are so far-fetched, like the Star Wars movies and
yeah,
you know, and that like when we're actually speaking to someone such as yourself that is saying, well, no, like this actually happens. Like this isn't make believe. We just can't fathom it. Like we don't. People are like, no, but yeah, the fact that the post office is even involved is like
right?
it goes
Yeah, it's
all the
it's
way to the
hugely involved. It's crazy.
yeah.
But not,
Like
I
I've
mean,
just
not really,
been
but it's hard to grasp.
it's hard to grasp. I'm like, just I've just been going to the post office my whole life, and there it was, just doing all the
Right
galactic
there. Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Yeah. So one of my, within those programs, they'll have actual US military generals and colonels who are involved. So like I've named in my testimony, the former head of our Department of Defense, Colonel Michael Aquino, he was heavily involved. And then our operational missional um, teacher for that, for this, for some of the spiritual gates was actual General Paul Vallely. And he's the head of the First Earth Battalion, which is a galactic battalion. He oversees Jedi. So, if you want to look up more on that, that's how you can find some stuff under the First Earth Battalion with General Paul Vallely. Um, so, within that, there's going to be a lot of different things. Their goal is to move kids to be missional. So that can include, training that is both for what we'd classify light side things, healing, recon, locating for those purposes. Then you have the dark side, which their job is to cause chaos, destruction, devastation. Many times that's done through weather manipulation, where they're going to use witchcraft to cause weather phenomena, whether that's hurricanes, whether that's massive fires, tornadoes. And then through that, the dark side's going to come in, they're going to cause the chaos and destruction. Then your light side's going to come in as the good guys through support services like your Red Cross, which is, your Knights of Malta, or FEMA, other humanitarian efforts. And as the light side, in that form of godliness, they're going to look like they're helping you. But really, it's a subtle way of getting willing consent. What are things that they demand to give you
Right.
help, right? They give you something.
Mm.
They give you access. That's considered a willing consent when you allow them to care for you. And in that, the quadrant leaders are getting access to you, to your children, to your homes, and you're going to begin to be spiritually impacted and not even know, you know, why you're experiencing all the spiritual warfare.
Right.
This is how they work. Um, so it can be either side. Children can go through training for both. Um, you know, just depending again what their position is and what they want to use those children for. And they will be operational regionally in different regions as
Mhm.
well as quadrants and universally.
Do
So,
the
those, go ahead.
so so the military bases, Jessie, does each quadrant have like specific training for the light side of the system and the dark side, or do they just all intermix? How does
No,
that
they
side?
do have very specific, yeah, based on the child's what they're going to use the child for, their
Yeah,
position. It will be catered to each child based on their
right,
position. So there's a
right.
general outline for training, um, both dark and light, but then there also is very specific.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And that goes back to like the fire, water, air. Is that
Mhm.
how they're all
Yeah.
interconnected? Yeah, okay. You're right.
Yeah, and how it works is it's just like school. You have different teachers, different classes. So like one of my main teachers was the Nazi Mike or let me start with Michael Karkoc. His job was to teach me defense magic as well as spiritual gate operations. So
Right.
every day I would be spent hours in training with him as he was teaching the defense magic. Then there were stints with that got into, energy. With that, then we'd work hand in hand with Raytheon Energy and other energy companies. That would then connect to your military base, which then was under one of my other teachers, Colonel Michael Aquino. Then,
Right.
like when I went to the labs for different training there, that dealt with John O'Brennan. He was one that would
Okay.
be involved with a lot of the labs. When I did like my stint on, began to learn alchemy as well as like procuring, making tinctures, potions. That was
Mm.
the Eastern Quadrant Grand High Priestesses, Lori Cabot Kent and Gloria Vanderbilt. Um, some of that dark magic, as well as mummification and other dark arts, that was Gloria Vanderbilt.
Mhm.
Lori Cabot Kent was more the Kabbalist, administrative, teaching, like so the cherubic signs, all those things we went over for the schools, that was Lori Cabot
Mhm.
Kent. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so there's, it's like you would just get different teachers, different classes, different forms of knowledge, and their job is according to your position, they're teaching you what they know. So they don't always have all the other information that, like Lori's not a master at defense magic, even though she's very skilled at, at different forms like Solomonic and Enochian magic. She's very skilled at those, but she doesn't know everything that Michael Karkoc knew.
Okay.
Her
So there's
job's
like
just to teach
specialties.
me. Yeah, her job's just to teach me what she knew that applies to my position. And she passes that knowledge on, the same as Karkok. So it is very specific in that way, even though there's a base framework that they developed that the kids will go through.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't imagine the first day of school sitting around in a circle and being told to pick whatever item or whatever you see or whatever you
Right.
think the item is, and then hearing, your friends or your training partner's voice. But as a kid, you just think, okay, this is a bit weird, but I'm just going to go along with this. And then I
Right.
can,
That's what I did. It was like, oh, cool. We can
cool.
talk without talking.
Yeah, yeah.
We
I
didn't
like,
know any better. We didn't know, anything, but what it is it's that spiritual connection that God
yeah.
gives. There wasn't any
Um,
magic or anything in it. The Lord just gave
yeah,
that spiritual connection.
yeah. And I guess from there they were like, okay, we kind of know like where with what strengths they have, which each child has, where we're kind of going to go with them, how far, how many, I suppose like gates they can access and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think like I guess as you go along, like any abuser, it starts off any form of abuse. It starts off you think, oh, this is cool. This person loves me. These people are nice.
Yeah.
And then over time, it's just they allow you to have that trust. And then all of a sudden they flip over to their other side and you think, okay, I guess they're still a good person. And being a child, you're so easily completely manipulated,
Yeah.
and by the time you're so far
It's
into
very
it,
much
it's
like that. It's like it's the constant severe trauma with all of a sudden you have to man up, put on your big girl pants, and you've got to cope through it. There isn't a not coping.
yeah,
If you want to live, you need to cope. And you realize, that not only do you want to live, but you want to see others live. And
right.
so it puts you in a position where you're constantly having to make choices that, most adults don't even have to make those choices on a regular basis. But it's
No.
that constant fear, that constant threat, that constant survival mode that you're in, and the things that you're witnessing and experiencing don't even count as triple X. Like it's like, you know, this stuff people can't even imagine the depth of the evil. Like it's just insane. And you have no words, you have nobody telling you what to expect. You're not prepared. Everything is your initial raw reaction. And in that raw reaction, you learn very quickly to make choices. And the truth is, your choices are either going to be good or bad. And those
Mm.
choices are going to define you. And it's very difficult to remain good in that system because they pretty much take that away from you. Even
Mm.
those that, even as a kid, you're in some of these situations and you're like, well, you know, I could just let myself die and then that will stop everything. But they don't let you die. So even if that's your best good reaction, they won't let it work that way so that you're now stuck not being able to die and still having to see or experience the abuse, the horror, the terrors, and you're just constantly stuck in it. um at the same time, it's not a hopeless place because
Mm.
very much the Lord is moving in that place. As hard as it is for us to understand what the depth of evil that's there, the Lord doesn't abandon people. He's very aware of what's going on. And I know that's a hard place for some people to hear because they're like, well, if God sees, if he knows, if he hears, why does he allow the evil to go on? Why does he not save everybody? And I don't have answers for all of that. But what I can say, is I know, like, for my own situation, if God had not allowed me to go through all of that, then there would be nobody to be that voice for those who have no voice right now. You
Mm.
have kids that are trapped in that system. You have those who are experiencing that depth of evil. And if nobody lived, if nobody, was able to come out of that, who would be that voice for them? Um, so not that justifies or gives a piece to that answer for most, but that's just the way it is.
No.
The
And
Lord sees.
exactly, and it's a powerful, it's a powerful testimony because there's so many people that never come out. There's so many people in it that become the perpetrators. They're either they die, like whatever it may be. They lose their minds. So to have someone such as yourself be able to survive all that and be sitting here today to say, this is what I went through. This is why
Mhm.
I'm here to give a voice to these people that are going through this now. It's just incredible. And I think it's important to remind people of that because
Yeah.
it's easy to get, like, I guess, lose, listening to these stories, people will lose a lot of hope and think, oh my gosh, like, it brings light to darkness. And I think that that's really important to remind viewers that, yeah, there's always that hope. And hopefully maybe if someone's been through it and they're going through a really horrible time or they don't want to speak out, this helps them in some way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my hope in sharing my testimony, is that it will help, that it will give, resolve, it will help to put pieces together. Sometimes that's all people have are the pieces. Um,
Mm.
you know, and there's things that we can do with those pieces. We don't always have to have the answer right here, right now,
No.
but it helps to understand, what is the outline, what's the framework, how do things work and operate. So as we keep going, that's kind of a very basic, grim outlook of the programs. Then, you will have specific projects. Projects are going to be, a specific thing that they're going to do with a set goal to accomplish. Um, you had Star Wars Now actually was known by other names, other project names. So you had things like Project uh, Flame Grill. You had Scanante was its original name. You have Centerline. So all of those projects are going to have a specific objective. The kids are going to be trained for something specific for a period of time, and then they're going to accomplish objectives through that. So that's going to get more into than the pulling in of some of your other operations under John O'Brien, which were things under the CIA, the DIA, more of your intelligence, your Five Eye, your CIA. You're going to get a lot of your um, Masons who are like your 15 to 30 degrees, joining into those group, being trained for those projects with the purpose that then their training is going to enable them to work for the three-letter agencies worldwide. So more of your, psychological intelligence are what you'll find a lot of the projects are connected to. The other way that can go with the projects is that it can connect also to your Priory of Zion, which your Priory of Zion sits under the council. They're like a second, not necessarily a secondary council, but they're kind of up there with the council. And they're going to be connected to like your universities, your Smithsonian, your Audubon societies, your antiquities, um, your antiques, things like that. So, art world, all of that. So they're gonna, get more into that focus in the communities, and they can be used as funding, as sponsors, um, financial backers behind the scenes, as well as for specialty secondary, third year, and fourth year training for children that are in these trainings. And so, they'll be entered into specific projects based on what they're wanting to further train the children in, or if they're wanting to use them in a specific, for something specific, they'll have a project for that. So it can be anything. Some of the examples, like you get many of the wizards will use creatures, familiar spirits for gathering intelligence. So they have entire programs where children work with animals or familiars and learn how to use those in gathering intel. Uh,
Right.
it can also be for magic, your specialty, particularly blood magic. That can get into, your Jesuits, your assassins, your under the Illuminati, your mafia, your cartels. Any of that can all be included in a lot of your different projects. Um, then you're going to have your MK Ultra, which is the most intense, and it goes hand in hand with the Voice of God project, but different. Like you have the overall Voice of God project. The end time agenda with that is to, get all the spiritual gates open, to create an army that's both human and demonic, and to, have those humans be able to host those demons so that when the gates open, they can, you know, hosting those demons, get them into the courts of heaven and usurp the throne of God. That's the overall Voice of God project.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, like, yeah, okay. That's
yeah,
the overall
that's
goal for
the
that.
overall.
Yeah.
Okay. And,
Yeah.
so not everybody in the majority of people in that are not programmed. So there's a difference between, the training, the being in the programs, the being in the projects, and being programmed. So, your MK Ultra is more like, what I talk about with the being programmed. That's where they're going to specifically, they're going to torture with the purpose of, having control of somebody's mind. That's what the programmed is they, they want control of your mind. They're going to have a handler over you. Handlers are different than teachers or proctors or
Right.
people that these children are successors for. Your teachers and your proctors, they're going to present things in a way like, you're going to learn. That learning is going to be very reflective and experiential. So you'll be put into a position within that experience. You're going to be experiencing things, and your reactions are all raw. You are making choices, and those choices impact what is happening in that experience. You don't have anybody telling you what to do or what to think. You know, you can ask questions, but if you ask questions, they're going to give you questions back. So, like an example would be, they're going to have you studying a lot of magic books, a lot of occultic books. Initiates of the Flame is one of their books for the Order of Melchizedek, which is the highest order. So if you're reading that book and you have, like, you see Valhalla, you see all these ancient cities like Shambhala, and if you, say to your proctor or teacher, oh my gosh, like, is Valhalla real? It's talking about Rainbow Bridge, and it's talking about, um, you know, all these other things. And oh my gosh, like, there is a Valhalla, Kansas. And there's a rainbow bridge that goes to Valhalla, Kansas from Topeka. And is Valhalla in Valhalla, Kansas? If you ask that, they're going to be like, well, I don't know. Is there a Valhalla? Like, you're going to get a question back.
Right.
But if you come to the truth, and that's what they're wanting, all the learning is if Kabbalah um, is reflective, they want you to come to the truth. If you come to the truth, you now have earned your right to see and to experience. So if you're like, oh my gosh, Valhalla is in Valhalla, Kansas, they're going to say, let's pack up. We're doing a road trip. Now you get to go. And now you're going to get to earn the entry in. So
Okay.
that's how that works. Versus like with your MK Ultra, your handlers, they're going to control every aspect. They make the decisions, they operate you. So that's the
Got it.
main difference I want to clarify. Um, and your MK Ultras, all of it is harsh. Your MK Ultra is the worst. And in the Voice of God project, you're going to have two end time groups that are kind of set up in the human armies. One, you get those that are the alpha warriors. Those individuals are specifically trained to prepare. They prepare for the end time scenarios. Many of us have seen that in our areas or our communities where all of a sudden we've got all these prepper teams, preparing for
Right.
all sorts of disasters, right? These are your
Okay.
alpha warriors out of the Voice of God project. That's their job, is to make sure areas are ready for whatever disaster scenario, end time event, including,
Okay.
Project Blue Beam, aliens, whatever it could be. They're going to prepare you for things you didn't even know. You're like, what the heck? Like, what would be that? You're like, but they're going to prepare you for it because that's their job. The other warrior group are your Omega warriors, and those are more your MK Ultra. Those are more your sleepers, and they're triggered when the event that they're trained to participate in is to occur. So this could
Okay.
even be for rallies, for riots. If they'll get called up and they'll be triggered and they'll do what they're made to do. And it can be very scary because, these people are not conscious, they're not consciously aware, and they're just in that drive, accomplish the objective mode. And this is where you'll see scary things like shooters that,
Yeah.
the police are trying to take them out and they've, have to put a million bullets in them to get them to stop. So that's more like when I speak of MK Ultra, that's more how I experienced or witnessed that.
Yeah, because I was just about to say, is that where like the sleepers where you see people go on spree killings, you see
Mhm.
the shootings, all of that, and I was going to say this, it
Yeah.
must be the switch that they flick, and because those people, it's always the same like situation. They've heard voices, and
Mhm.
then the voices told them what to do and they went and did it,
Yeah.
tragically. But Jessie, I wanted to ask, obviously being in training and going through everything you went through, this is probably a bit of a random question, but with surely you got in, like I'm sure you got injured. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine the things you had to do and go through. And how did you? I know I've heard you speak about like healing. They would get the white witches in to heal you. Could you maybe talk on that? Because
Yeah, I call them
that's
the witchy hands. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so they use it. They have, a lot of your priestesses, they have select group of priestesses that are going to be involved with the trainings. They are going to do healings for children, and not just little things, we experience, I mean, if I put it into truthful words, we had the hell beat out of us every day. We'd have broken bones, we've gotten skewered before. Um, and they're going to heal those things. I was drowned multiple times. The worst time, literally, it's the one grace I give Michael Carcock because he's the one who uh, revived me. But, you know, that was actually my proctor drowned me when I was little. And then from that, I got complications with pneumonia, and they sent one of the Sisters of Light, Callista Gingrich, who I've named in my affidavits, to heal my lungs from that. But you get all sorts of complications. And my thought in that is, if children are reporting to you that things are happening to them, if they're saying my arm was broke, but then you look and there's not even a bruise or anything, pray, ask the Lord to show you, because it really, these individuals can heal to such an extent. They even, your grand high priest and priestesses, many of them will go through crucifixion. That's part of how they get into that position. They will be crucified, and they have to raise themselves from the dead. So that's, the type of magic that they're going to be doing, where they can heal with word, they can heal with energy, they can heal with touch. But the body always keeps score. The body will, as children age, some of the biggest issues I started to figure out from myself, and then realized other survivors were going through the exact same thing. But some of the odd issues that the body, or that it will manifest through as you age as a survivor, are the electrolytes. The potassium is a big one. Thyroid.
Potassium. Okay.
So that can all
Is
be
this things
impacted.
that lack later on, like you can't, your levels are all wrong and
Right, your adrenos, yep, your because they use a lot of the functioning adreno, which they use it to heighten your spiritual acuity. Your body will just use up, or your body stops producing the hormone or the chemical because you have it coming in from an outside source. So like
right,
potassium, because because of the amount of energy and things that they were having you do, your body would just use up so much potassium. They'd have to, like I talk in my affidavits, I'd have to eat like 10 bananas a day. And the guys was that I just loved bananas so much. But then I'd get at night, I'd get really severe restless legs and Charlie horses in my calves as a kid. They'd
so
run me
painful.
super hot baths and stuff to try to calm my muscles because of the potassium issues. I would be getting all the muscle cramps and the Charlie horses, you know, and then that continued into adulthood and kept getting worse and worse until I learned how to I learned that I had to keep it at a higher level. Like
Right.
I didn't function at a normal level. My body had to have that high amount. Yeah.
It's always going to be, like it's got to go somewhere. You can't go through all that and not have something that your body goes, okay, enough is enough. Um,
Yeah.
and also just like, not being not being in a state of trauma all the time, because you'd be so continuously over and over again traumatized in whatever situations they were putting you in, having to undo that and, like, I suppose mend your nervous system. That would have been, that I can't imagine the task that would be.
Yeah. That'd be a great topic for the next show we do, talking
Yeah, I
about
know.
what that looks like, the mending,
Yeah, the
you
men.
know,
Yeah,
the coping, all of that,
because that's a whole other subject. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I often people probably think, why is she smiling and laughing throughout this? But I'm kind of like, oh, I kind of just think one thought I keep getting is, man, like, if you pray to God, you pray and you say, hey, like, can you please, that is so much easier than being in the system. It is so much
Yeah.
work. And I don't mean that I'm not making light of the evil that they commit every day and put these poor
Right.
children through. But it's so much work. Like you could just say a
Yeah.
prayer and get your answer. And they kind of spend all this time and energy and rituals and everything just to kind of, I suppose, play God in a way, but they're
Yeah.
never going to be God. And it's mind blowing. But I think we probably will wrap it up. I think our
Mhm.
hour is done. I don't want to keep you, Jessie, but we definitely will speak. I think speaking about many, my cat has just opened the door and come in, and my dog and my other two cats. So, but no, Jessie, thank you again. I really, really
Yeah.
appreciate you being here. Always. I mean, this is the second time, but it's so interesting and fascinating. And
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
been amazing speaking to you. And I will make sure I put all of your links in the bio
Great.
below. Very important.
Let me
And
give one more resource too. Um,
yeah, yeah,
I think we'll continue to break down more about the training, but I have done an extensive series. I think there's about, I want to say there's 7 to 15 videos, but it's most of them are titled The Gateway Experience.
right.
And in that, I get into the military bases and the Gateway Experience projects and programs, and that's with Aquarius Rising Africa. Uh, so people can get into that. And then specifically for those who are looking at the Mormon connection, we have about a 15 video series on the training that happens that would interface with the Mormon church as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, without holding you up, Jesse, I remember watching a documentary about the Mormon church and I saw the massive eye on the temple
Mhm.
and I was like, oh, like I definitely believe that that is not God is just
Right.
the front. It's definitely, yeah. And hopefully we can get into that eventually as well.
Sure.
But look,
Definitely.
Jesse, thank you. And thank you for
Yeah.
everyone who watches. I hope you guys enjoy the show and stay safe. Until next time.
All right. Bye-bye.